Marry My Dead Son, Part 1. Mrs. Owoh was sitting in her mansion looking at sympathizers troop in and out of her massive mansion. While her husband was crying and people were consoling him, she was just sitting on her favorite couch, putting on a dark eyeglass, exhibiting a very calm demeanor. Sorry for your loss, they all said to her, but she never replied to anyone. She was simply humming her son's favorite music and nodding her head to the rhythm. She briefly looked outside and saw her personal assistant running after the obituary banner of her son Oriva. He was just 22 years old. A young handsome, intelligent son of a billionaire, who lost his way and followed the line of destruction. I heard he died of drug overdose. Mrs. Owoh overheard one of their sympathizers gossiping. They were saying a lot of hurtful things about her boy, her only child, the heir to their fortune, who will now take over all these houses, companies, industries, even schools, another woman said hissing. Well, maybe their relatives that they have refused to help will come and squander everything. Another woman chipped in, and they all laughed. Mrs. Owoh could not take the senseless talk she was hearing anymore, so she stood up and walked outside. Take me to mother, she instructed her driver. Oh, dear, come in and cry it out, don't bottle it up, mother said, hugging Mrs. Owoh, who was already vibrating with sobs. After some hours, Mrs. Owoh slept off. She woke up later and said, Oriva is getting married next month, we need to prepare. Mother, are you listening? She barked angrily. Mother looked at her and said, I am, but why? Why? Did you just ask why? I cannot lose my only child like this, mother. Our only chance of having our blood on earth just died, and you ask me why? I need to find a wife for him. You must do something to make his spirit be seen and felt by his wife. Mrs. Owoh said in a commanding tone. Is that all you want? Mother asked soothingly. Yes, Mrs. Owoh said and stormed out. Mother was a powerful seer whom the upper class and politicians considered a water god. She controlled and directed their day-to-day affairs. Her prophecies and directions never failed her sheep. She can invoke the dead, kill anyone you wish to get killed, so far as you can pay her fee, which were usually blood. So when Mrs. Owoh made her request, Mother already knew what to do. Few days after Oriva's burial, Mother called Mrs. Owoh on the phone and said, we will need a boy his age to invoke Oriva's spirit. That was not hard, because Mrs. Owoh immediately sent his men to kidnap a young man of the same age with Oriva. Mother killed him and used his blood to invoke Oriva's spirit. Oriva appeared and his mother took him home. Honey, look, our son is back, Mrs. Owoh said with a teary voice to her husband who was buried in grief. He leaped and hugged Oriva saying, we missed you, my boy, where have you been? They both hugged him and they had dinner happily as a family. We are already looking for a wife for you, Mrs. Owoh said joyfully. Oriva smiled and continued eating. Their domestic staff thought they were crazy for constantly talking to an empty chair, as if Oriva was there. What they didn't know was that he was actually there, watching everyone. Every day, Mrs. Owoh would drive around town looking for any struggling family with daughters of marriageable age